that right now. Hello, my name is Jonathan Cohn. I'm the policy director here at Progressive Mass, and we are delighted to have you joining us this evening to talk about the ballot questions that you will see this November on the ballot. Obviously, there are many things on the ballot that have been on people's minds, but in Massachusetts in particular, we have 5 statewide ballot questions. We will hear from presenters on behalf of all of the 5 questions that you'll see on the ballot. We will also at the end hear from presenters for kind of a set of district specific ballot questions that you might see if you're in a specific set of state legislative districts. That is kind of our general framework for the night. One thing I will also just quickly drop in the chat, we are curious to know what people are excited to work on this year. So I made just a quick survey that if at now or later or in the middle of this, if you want to tell us what you're excited to do this year. Are you excited to be working on any particular of these ballot questions, all of these ballot questions, some subset of them? So I'm just dropping a quick link on that in that regard into the chat. The election is coming up soon. As folks know, it's less than 2 months away. You will be getting a ballot in the mail in just a few weeks because of how early mail ballots come. And we want to make sure that everybody is an informed and engaged voter, both themselves and then engaging and informing other people. So also, we've already, as an organization, have formally endorsed 2 questions. We've already held endorsement votes on questions 2 and 5, which you'll again learn about this evening. We will be polling the other questions as well for endorsement. And if you would like to become a member and participate in our endorsement processes, just dropping that into the chat for how to become a member of Progressive Mass. We will go sequentially through the different questions this evening. Kind of, we're devoting about 15 minutes to each question. That's going to be a combination of presentation as well as questions. If you have a question during a presentation, drop it in the chat at any point in time, and we'll kind of curate a few of those questions to ask the presenters to help make sure that things move smoothly. Then to kick things off, I believe I saw her here, so I'm going to invite up State Auditor Diana DiZoglio to talk about question 1. So kind of Auditor DiZoglio, again, you'll have about kind of 15 minutes divided between presentation and then any questions at the end. So
great. Great. Thank you so much, Jonathan. I really appreciate the opportunity. Can you hear me?
Yes, I took you off spotlight instead of me. So okay, you're good.
No worries. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all virtually. It's great to see everyone. My name is Diana DiZoglio. I'm your state auditor. I'm really excited about many of the ballot questions, actually, but I am here tonight to talk about question 1. And slogan for it is question 1, bring on the sun. Question 1 is all about bringing sunlight to Beacon Hill, which is frequently ranked as having the least transparent state legislature in the entire nation, not subject to public records laws, not subject to open meeting laws. Obviously, legislative work getting conducted in the middle of the night with no public hearings, no recorded roll calls. I know this is not a new story to Progressive Mass, who has worked diligently to increase transparency and accountability on Beacon Hill. Our office right now is trying to conduct an audit of the Massachusetts legislature, but the Speaker and Senate President have been pushing back tremendously, so refusing to cooperate with our office and our office's requests, even just for simple documents, receipts pertaining to even financial records to verify that financial statements are actually accurate. We have actually conducted audits of the state legislature dating back to the creation of the auditor's office back in 1849. We have conducted at least 117 audits of our state legislature since the inception of the auditor's office. And it's only been in recent years that those audits stopped happening. They stopped happening in the early 90s in sync with the first indictment of 3 indictments of speakers in the House of Representatives. That's the time period that the audits stopped happening in our state legislature. They always existed before that. The reason why some folks, and I myself previously even thought that maybe they didn't exist before I actually took office, is because those audits were never digitized. They were held in some dusty old books on some dusty old shelves, and they were stacked up in the back of the auditor's office out of public view. So it was able to be said that they didn't exist, but they very much do. We've digitized those audits of the legislature. We've put them up on our website for public viewing. And we are advocating to bring back the practice. This is not something new. We're trying to bring back the practice of auditing our state legislature like we audit every other state entity across Massachusetts, including not just our executive agencies, but also our judiciary. We audit the judiciary as well. We audit the courts as well. This legislative audit would help to increase transparency and accountability, examine processes and procedures. We'd be able to look at things like whether or not sexual harassment training is occurring, or conflict of interest training, ethics training, whether or not those things are occurring. We'd be able to look at, again, those receipts to ensure that claimed expenditures are actually what the expenditures are. We do a reconciliation process.
Thank you.
We do a reconciliation process in the auditing process in places like UMass, the UMass system. We recently conducted audits of UMass Dartmouth and UMass Lowell, for example, where we were able to look at their credit card claimed expenditures, and then we were able to ask for documentation and view their receipts so that we could tell whether or not the claimed expenditures matched the receipts. Right now, we can't do that in the state legislature. They refuse to produce any receipts. We'd also be able to look at things like state contracting and procurement procedures. I'm not sure who had an opportunity recently to look at one of our most recent audits, but we just audited the Massachusetts Convention Center Authority. And in that audit, we ended up looking at issues pertaining to racial discrimination, retaliation, how employee complaints are handled. And we also looked at state contracting and procurement. There were a lot of allegations regarding the Convention Center Authority over the course of the last year or so. Our office went in. We actually uncovered through the audit that the law was violated regarding state contracts. And during the Baker administration, unlawful contracts were executed in the hundreds of thousands of dollars without following any procurement process or procedure, giving out no bid contracts. We also found that an unlawful $1.2 million non-disclosure agreement was executed to conceal allegations of racial discrimination and retaliation. These things are unacceptable. They shouldn't be happening in our state agencies. We referred that to the Attorney General's office. We can't look at those things in our state legislature because they refuse to participate in an audit like the Convention Center did participate in the audit to their credit, even though the findings were challenging. The new interim executive director participated in the audit, and she's getting to work to clean up the mess that was left by the previous administration. Also, just looking at all the concerns regarding, folks know the State House Employee Union, employees would like to unionize. There are a lot of challenges regarding employee issues. We were able to, in our recent audit of a contract that was privatized at the MBTA in recent years, we were able to conduct an audit of that contract where services were privatized during a loophole period in which the Taxpayer Protection Act is not required to be followed, again, by the previous administration. So the MBTA, during that loophole period, executed a contract with a private vendor, privatized services pertaining to safety, pertaining to performance. And we went in, we analyzed the contract, and we found out that that private vendor was not even appropriately training their employees to make sure that they were trained on safety. And we know we've had issue after issue regarding safety and performance at the MBTA. That's what we were able to uncover at the MBTA in one of our more recent audits. We can't look at training. We can't look at what is the case and if there are service level agreements in the contracts that the state legislature is executing because they refuse to participate in this audit. So we are looking to conduct the same type of audit that we conduct for all of these other state entities and look at the same types of issues. And we would also be able to do comparative analyses and look at, for example, what other states do that maybe Massachusetts could do, but we don't do yet, for the purposes of augmenting the available services that the legislature does have, especially those that pertain to increasing that transparency and accountability and accessibility to those who are seeking information and the ability to have a seat at the table. We are leading on so many different things across Massachusetts. We've led the country in many, many different ways. We should be leading the country on this. I want to close because I know there might be questions, but just by saying, I love our legislature. I love our legislators. I think that there are so many good legislators across our Commonwealth who are doing really great work and advocating to the best of their ability to get the job done on behalf of their constituents. But the system is broken, and the culture of power on Beacon Hill does not do anything to ensure that there is a democratic process of any kind on Beacon Hill. So even though there are a lot of great people up there trying to do great work on many of our behalves, unfortunately, that toxic culture that promotes an anti-democratic system of governance is really having a negative impact on those legislators and on the communities that they represent, especially our underserved populations. We need to take action, and we need to do everything we can to help in increasing that accountability, accessibility, and transparency up on Beacon Hill. An audit won't be able to solve all of the issues. Many of the things that need to change do need to come from within the body, but an audit would help. And we're trying to do our part in the Office of State Auditor and do our jobs and simply conduct an audit, which is pretty much the only job of the Office of State Auditor, is to conduct audits. We'd love to be able to conduct that audit on your behalf, but because we've been blocked and because of the lack of participation, and also because we've been obstructed from being able to pursue this matter in court, our only avenue essentially is to bring this to the ballot, to ask all of you to please support this initiative when you go to vote in the November elections on November 5th. So please vote yes on one, bring back the practice of auditing. Let's make it explicit in the law that already says that all departments, offices, and activities are to be audited by the Office of State Auditor. Let's add in the language just to clear up the apparent confusion that includes the general court, so that there are no more excuses about supposed exemptions that don't really exist. We'll just clear that up and we'll lay that out for everybody to see. We can't do that without you. Please vote yes on one, bring on the sun. And Jonathan, I'm going to turn it back over to you if there are any questions.
Awesome. And I'll bring up a few questions from the chat that I see people have. I'll start with kind of one of them that I'll kind of bundle two questions that I saw from people is, what are the arguments that you most commonly hear against this, and how would you then respond to them?
Okay, so the argument number one is that I shouldn't be the one to conduct this audit because I have been critical of legislative proceedings. And respectfully, that argument has come from legislative leaders and their loyalists for the most part. My argument back has been, I campaigned very transparently that this is what I was going to do on all of y'all's behalf if I was elected. And that election occurred. I was duly elected. I am the state auditor. It is my job to do the job now. I understand that not everybody, might like my personal style or whatever, but I am elected to do this job, and I am doing my best to do the job that exists before me. So personalities aside, I understand some people might not think I'm the one to do it, but I'm not on the ballot. I already was on the ballot. This is the issue that's on the ballot this year, is whether or not the Office of State Auditor should be auditing the legislature like every other entity, following those same guidelines. I further say to that argument, Jonathan, that I'm critical of the MBTA too. I've been critical of DCF's handling of underserved children. I have been critical of elder affairs when they have lied to our office about updating their regulations pertaining to elder abuse and neglect cases. I was critical of the convention center's use of non-disclosure agreements. Certainly, I have not heard a public outcry to ask me to stop auditing entities like the MBTA. So we all have our opinions. We still have jobs to do. And yes, I do have an opinion that the legislature needs a lot of help when it comes to transparency and accountability. I will continue to share my opinion and to do my job. The other is constitutionality. We've gotten pushback from leaders who say that they don't believe this is constitutional. Respectfully, that's a bogus argument. If the executive branch is not able to provide any oversight because the legislature makes its own rules and because of some supposed separation of powers in that regard, then that would mean that state ethics would not be able to do their job. It would also mean that we can kiss the Office of Campaign and Political Finance goodbye because they're part of the executive branch. Furthermore, the legislature oftentimes conducts oversight hearings, even through a committee that's called the Post-Audit and Oversight Committee. And they often conduct oversight and audit hearings over the executive branch agencies. We saw that during the COVID-19 pandemic response with the Baker administration. We've seen MBTA oversight hearings, executive branch. So the legislature provides oversight through their hearings, and the executive branch through the State Ethics Commission and OCPF. And the judiciary is also a different department, branch of government. If the judiciary can't provide oversight to the legislature because of separation of powers, we're going to have some problems. So I find it unfortunate that the only time the separation of powers appears to be a problem for legislators is when it pertains to this audit, but they fail to recognize that if there was a separation of powers preventing oversight regarding one branch of another, that all of those entities would no longer be able to provide any oversight of other branches like they have been doing for many, many years.
Thank you. And let me get to another question in the chat. And I think I'm going to read the two parts of the question. I think the second part also kind of addresses that question. We'll address some other ones in the chat. So if question one passes, how would audits be prioritized and when would audit progress and results be published? E.g. prioritization, interim reports, final reports, etc. And then the second question there was if we used to perform audits of the legislature, is it legal to perform one now? And if so, could the legislature be compelled to cooperate by the courts?
So first question is that we would prioritize it based on our resources. Unfortunately, our office has been retaliated against, and we have not seen the resources that we need come into the Office of State Auditor to be able to conduct the audits in as robust of a fashion as I would like, and in a more timely fashion, which I would like. The previous auditor was not able to meet the mandate of conducting audits once every 3 years. Our office is really trying to do so, but we're doing so after just seeing a 4 to 5 times less of an increase than other constitutional officers who got 9 and 10% increases. Our office got 2. The COLAs last year in our office were 8%. So we are doing the best that we can with what we have, but it is dependent upon resources when we do get to do audits. However, we are conducting an audit of the legislature right now, and that audit will be released in hopefully coming weeks. We're working really hard to get it done, but the audit is really lacking because it doesn't have a lot of the information that we requested in order to complete the audit. I'm releasing the audit anyways because I really do want people to see what an audit would look like. I know there have been a lot of questions. What would an audit look like? So we are going to be releasing that audit hopefully in coming weeks so that folks can see what an audit of the legislature would look at. Again, it would be focused on processes, procedures, and also those financials and state contracts.
Awesome.
I hope that
Thank
answers the
you.
question.
And then I'll just do two other questions that I see, and then kind of going on to the next one. And I'll read both out. One, somebody was asking about, is this binding? That gets to part of the part of what you were just talking about. And then have another person noting about referencing the One Globe article from a few months ago about like the high-end meals from the legislature in the situation that they're in now of kind of being gone for a number of months, where any single person can effectively hold up legislation. And to what extent would the audit be able to touch on some of those aspects of the way that the State House works?
I'll do my best to get to all those things. If I forget something, please hit me up in an email, friends, because I'm happy to respond to an email too if I forgot something or missed something. So regarding the meals and the Globe articles and all that, I can tell you that these audits, when they first started getting done way back in the day, audited down to the last cigar purchase by the Speaker of the House. It actually listed how much money was spent on cigars by the Speaker's office. So we would be able to look at all of those receipts and find out exactly what those receipts say, as long as they're complying and they're handing over those receipts. The compliance factor in and of itself, this goes back to the last question too. And yes, this would be something that would be law after the ballot question passes, that it would be the same as the governor signing off on the law, and that being enacted. Yes, it could end up going to court. And I've been asked about, if it goes to court, what are we thinking? I'm prepared for that court battle. I actually have repeatedly asked to go to court and to settle the fact that the current law already stipulates that the legislature is subject to audits. And it's my stern belief that they're violating the law right now. But I have been prevented from having an impartial hearing in court, which is every resident's constitutional right in the state of Massachusetts to get that impartial hearing. Our office has been denied that, unfortunately, that opportunity to have the matter adjudicated in court. So we'll see if legislative leaders want to challenge the will of the people after that November election, when I have every confidence that this is going to pass. We'll see if they want to challenge this in court. And if they do, I'm prepared for that battle. I've been preparing for the last couple of years for that, and hopefully it doesn't come to that. Hopefully legislative leaders simply respect the will of the people and cooperate as they always used to before the early 90s.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And just final quick question. If people want to learn more about question one, where should they go?
Sure. You can just go to my website. It's dianaforma.com, dianaforma.com, and then just click on the ballot button and it'll tell you all you need to know right there. We're really grassroots at this point. Donations have slowed a little bit. So if anybody would like to make a contribution, feel free to click the donate button too. The biggest challenge, in my opinion, was getting this on the ballot. I am putting my faith in the voters, that the voters are going to go and vote for this. But certainly we are looking for some assistance, letters to the editor, contributions, and any assistance, just posting to your social media, letting folks know that we have an opportunity to really make some meaningful change here. Let's not miss this moment.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And can I get a round of Zoom applause for Auditor Diana DiZoglio before we go on to the next speaker?
Thanks, everybody. Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
I'm going to now bring up Kara Berg-Powers, who will be here for question 2. Let me bring up Kara now. Okay, Kara, take it away.
Hello. All right. So Kara Berg-Powers, she, her, hers. I am in Worcester, and for those who need it, I am a white woman in a black tank top in a very chaotic small office room with lots of things on the walls, including, though, I will say, a AFT National Week of Action old school poster about fulfilling the promise of Brown v. Board, which today actually is an interesting anniversary in regards to that, because it is the day that Governor Faubus closed the schools in Arkansas after the Little Rock Nine. So a lot of the time we just see like Little Rock Nine, and then like celebration, but actually there was a whole year where students didn't have access to schools because segregationists did not want to send their kids to school with Black children. And that is actually part of the legacy that I teach high stakes standardized testing in line with in my complexities of urban schooling classes. So our movement from the 1980s into the 90s to introduce things like charter schools, high stakes standardized testing is a direct response to the height of integration in our country, which was actually in the late 1980s. So 30 years post Brown v. Board. And I think that that's important context to go into this fight with. And of course, I should be very clear to say that Yes on 2 does not get rid of the MCAS, despite many, many millennial desires for it to do so, as an elder millennial myself. What it does is replace the 10th grade specific grades that exist right now for the MCAS as graduation requirements. And I think that this is actually, this is probably one of the things that comes up the most for people. Like, we need the test. We don't. I think that's very clear. And part of how I know this is that I have a doctorate in education. I train future teachers. I have been personally working against the kind of high stakes standardized testing culture that we have for over 20 years when I myself had to take the MCAS. And looking back on letters to the editor, which as Auditor Zaglio said, that is a thing that helps in like provide clarity for all of these ballot questions, that we were writing back almost 25 years ago, all the things that we as students, when we were organizing as SCAM, which is MCAS backwards, said were going to happen around the narrowing of our curriculum, around the hyper focus on very easily quantifiable education outcomes, which not only pushes out things like arts and phys ed, but even those that are parents like me that have kids that are in the earlier grades might have noticed, even less time for things like science, social studies, health, that are a core part of our educational curriculum. So the Yes on 2 replaces the current graduation requirement of the MCAS, which is in 10th grade right now. Students have to pass. I brought up the website because it's not, people think it's like a test, and it's not. And it's very important to understand that. So to graduate, students have to earn a score of 472 or higher on ELA, 486 or higher on math, and those were recently raised by the Board of Education, and a 220 or higher on the legacy science, technology, and engineering test, or a passing standard in 467 in biology, or a 470 in introductory physics. So there are potentially 5 tests that students have to take and pass at least 3 of them in order to graduate high school. And this is directly from the Department of Education's graduation requirement page, which is 3/4 about the MCAS. And then at the bottom, we have other high school requirements and guidelines, which is 4 years of English, 4 years of, so passing grades in 4 years of English, 4 years of mathematics, 3 years of a lab-based science, 3 years of history, 2 years of the same foreign language, a year of arts, and then 5 additional courses like health, technology, business, and those, we have a great variety of AP courses. I'll keep my issues with College Board to myself with the purposes of this call. But students who are taking with some of my colleagues, yes, I absolutely will post those, who are taking things like AP Psychology, that counts towards your graduation. So one of the things that's important to understand is that if we have this gate of these tests, none of those other graduation requirements matter. So you can take all of those courses that I just listed over your 4 years of high school, pass them with A's. And if you do not get those specific grades on the Massachusetts Comprehensive Assessment System, which is a high stakes standardized test, it is not a system and it is not assessment, then you do not get a high school diploma. And that's in your sophomore year. So one of the arguments is that then you get 2 more years to pass it. Okay, so then for 2 years, you are doing the same coursework while everyone else has moved on. So this is holding our students back in multiple ways. Even more harmful, I think, is that this downward pressure from this like graduation requirement pushes down on the younger grades too. So students are taking these tests from 3rd grade. 3rd grade through 10th grade, students are taking these tests. And it's an enormous amount of their school year. We know that the history of standardized testing in this country is deeply rooted in providing a scientific rationale for discrimination. Right? It's very deeply tied to our early compulsory education and the eugenics movement. And I don't say that as just like scaremongering. We can very clearly see, and I teach the line from sort of this faulty, set of metrics that are not measuring deep learning, that are preventing us even from having deep learning in our classrooms, because we are having to teach in ways that are familiar to the test. So that means that some of the 2nd grade mentor teachers that I am working with that are taking my Master's of Teaching students into their classroom are getting folders of Pearson materials that are just, here's a short story to read, and then here are the questions you should ask, and then here's a set of acceptable answers to those questions. So, we've seen some of those like very, just sort of pithy like postcard or sticker things that are like, how will kids ever ask the questions that we need to ask if they only are learning how to answer the questions that have already been asked? But this is very, very, very important that when we are talking about teaching to the test, we are not talking about teaching material that is on the test. So teachers have complaints about that as well in terms of, as you heard, 3 different potential scientific standards. But also that we are teaching in a way that makes testing make sense. And so our entire school systems have been reconfigured around this very transactional, narrow way of learning. And I will tell you, as a college professor, we see the results of that in our classrooms. We see having to open people back up to critical thinking, being willing to ask questions that they don't expect a right or wrong answer to, right? To have deeper conversations. Some of the things we're talking about the binary and polarization of our democratic discourse is deeply harmed by us being stuck in this very transactional way of doing education. So why are we doing it? Well, you can look at the OCPF reports and see very clearly why we're doing it. If you look at Protect Our Kids, which is the No On To campaign, and you see multiple 5- and 6-figure contributions from the very corporations that stand to make tons of money from the implementation of these tests and the continuation of these practices. Because the fact is they are not just getting money from running the tests themselves, right? From 1st through 5th grade, my daughter's in 6th grade now, and there's been some really great changes to the curriculum in Worcester over the last couple of years. But from 1st through 5th grade, she came home every year with 2 500-page math workbooks. Wait, I have it right here. Thankfully, because my husband saved it. This is from kindergarten, friends. This is from kindergarten. This is a Pearson workbook. So that means these are all worksheets. This is half of the kindergarten coursework. And this is designed, as you can see, to directly correlate to the kind of things that they are going to see on the tests. So in addition to the money that they get for running the tests themselves, they're also getting the money to 2 of these workbooks to every kindergartner in the 2nd largest district in the state, right? And then any of the contracts for the online portals for those things, consultants to show people how to do them. This is an enormous racket, right? And it's ultimately what it does, and what we said it would do 25 years ago, is that it strips our confidence in our educators. It says, no, taking these 32 credits of class time in these courses with the highest standards in the country. There are 2 states in the entire country that rate by the Zin Education Project as actually teaching Reconstruction, which I think anyone who's looking around right now knows that that's an important thing in history for us to know. It's just Massachusetts and Hawaii. That's it. We have the highest education standards in the country. So when people say we need the MCAS because we need high standards, it's a ruler, friends. It's a bad ruler, but it's a ruler. It is not standards. It's just a measurement tool. Our standards are not going anywhere. In fact, we will be better able to meet the standards, the very high standards that we, as educators, I was part of developing the art standards that we have now. We spend weeks in rooms looking over things, debating things, bringing our experience to the table. The standards that we have are great, and we should trust our teachers to teach them and assess them in lots of different ways that actually measure informative ways while our students are still learning, and we can course correct the things that they need to learn how to do, the knowledge that they need to be able to use, and then say that they're ready for the next grade. And we need to be able to trust teachers to do that, and not strip that power away with this really just corporate giveaway. So again, as much as I would like it to be, this does not get rid of the MCAS. It does, though, open up a bigger conversation, and it does make it so that the consequences of this one high stakes test do not mean for 700 students a year, as it does right now, that they don't get to walk across that stage after all their hard work. In fact, in 2022, we did not require it because of the pandemic, and chaos has not ensued. These 700 kids just got their diplomas, and the world went on as usual, right? Because whether or not you pass this one test is not an indicator of whether or not our students are actually ready for the real world. We have tons more indicators of that. And if we reduce some of the focus on the test, we'll have the resources to put those really great tools into better practice. So this is really critical. I think this is a generational opportunity to correct a really, really harmful mistake in our education reform history, and one that we get to engage with what next looks like, right? Because people will say, well, we can't get rid of it when we don't have anything else. We have lots of other things, first of all. And second of all, every time we pass a ballot initiative, the legislature has to actually then figure out how we implement it. That's how this works, right? So this gives us all an opportunity to be at the table to think about how we want our schools to be measuring the things that we want them to measure. As of right now, the MCAS would still be used as a tool for measuring districts and schools. That is what it is used for. In fact, it's part of why it's so harmful that in 10th grade, the rug gets completely pulled out while kids are told from 3rd grade to 9th grade, this is just measuring the schools, it's not about you. Then it just becomes automatically about them. So right now, that doesn't change at all. So yeah, I will see what folks have for questions.
So anybody feel free to ask questions in the chat. One that I saw somebody just asked is I see a question in the chat about what does this mean about telling apart good teachers from bad teachers? Absolutely, yeah. So I should have explained that I was sort of answering that question because I have a bad professor habit of keeping an eye on the chat. So as of right now, so I really want to push back a little bit on that frame in general of good teachers versus bad teachers, because I think it is a frame that comes directly from people that are trying to undermine our confidence in educators and our trusted educators. Of course, all of us have had teachers that are phoning it in, right? All of us have had teachers that should have retired 10 years ago. And just like any other mythology about how we should change society, right? I grew up in a neighborhood, and I grew up on food stamps myself, and I grew up in a neighborhood with lots of other people on public assistance. And everyone knew somebody that was whatever, gaming the system the way that we say it. And then that's able to extrapolate to a whole mythology of like, this is a huge problem. It's not a huge problem. The fact is, we do not have an enormous problem with having to, ferret out all the bad teachers and fix it. That's just not a thing that's happening. Even teachers that I deeply, deeply disagree with their, pedagogical approach. We've had a lot of change in the field over the last 30 years, care deeply about their kids in classrooms. I don't know any teacher that doesn't call
their students, their kids, right? So I think that's really important. That said, how we measure as a overall schools and districts will not change. This is just about the graduation requirement for students.
And let me get to other questions in the chat. I'm gonna basically kind of clarify one question about like what just kind of repeating again, like what replaces the kind of the graduation requirement of the test. Since as you know, the MCAS itself does not go away, but what is the replacement for like that requirement?
Right, and so the ballot initiative does not have a specific position on that. So there are some different approaches it can take. I think the most compelling is that there is actually a consortium. I'm gonna get the actual acronym so I don't mess it up. The Massachusetts Consortium for Innovative Education Assessment, which is a collaborative of superintendents, educators, folks in higher ed that have been studying this for a long time, that have been piloting alternatives to the MCAS in districts across the Commonwealth for near a decade. So people have been working on the alternative to this, more robust, more authentic assessment opportunities to not just have requirements for students, but actually to assess our districts more holistically as well. So I would say that bringing that consortium to the table is probably our best bet for our next step.
Then I see a question in the chat saying, isn't it the case that MCAS is only given in English and therefore the impact on students still learning English are especially impacted, which can show that they've learned by passing courses that like, kind of who can show that they've learned by passing courses that meet the standards?
Yes, and this is very important for me as, I'll put that link in the chat also, Melanie. In addition to the link, so there is, the kind of support in a district. So I'm in a district where there is anywhere from like 12 to 80 language communities in our public schools in any given year. And our students get legally required services for that in the classroom to demonstrate what they are learning and to build their English proficiency towards citizenship tests, towards workplace use, right? And some of them are coming in as late as junior and senior year of high school, having passed all of their coursework in their home countries and cities, because sometimes it's coming from Puerto Rico, which is still, not a different country. And then they have to take this test with literally the accommodation is a translation dictionary. And so most of us would not do very well on a test not in our home language with just like a here, you can translate it yourself. And that is 3rd through 10th grade. That's not just for the 10th grade graduation. So that's also how we're measuring schools right now.
And then I'll just do one other question that I see in the chat and then wrap up this one. Somebody was asking about how an employer could compare graduates with this. Although like the test, I don't even know if employers see MCAS results and the test does still exist.
No. MCAS, so I think it's super important to understand that other than for your graduation requirement and you getting it sent home in the fall each year, nobody ever sees your individual MCAS test, because the MCAS are not designed as an individual measurement tool. They are designed to be an aggregate sort of touch point in time for large, disaggregated amounts of people. They're not supposed to be individual metrics. That's part of why the graduation requirement is so harmful. So absolutely an employer would never be seeing it. I also don't know that any employers would find it particularly relevant. And I actually think that that's a huge, it's important to push back on that talking point from our chambers of commerce, because they are really pulling that out, that we need to know that people are employment ready. There is nothing on the MCAS that is actually helping people be more ready for any careers. They're not actually defending their members that want an informed and engaged and ready workforce. They're fighting for their members who are making a ton of money from this system.
Awesome. Well, final question. If people want to learn more about question 2, where should they go?
Absolutely. They should. So if they would like to learn more, I will get the link for that. You'll appreciate this, Jonathan. I actually have the mobilized link right here. So if you're excited to get involved, we have phone banks 3 nights a week now. So that is the page where you can find that. I will drop a link in the chat for getting more information. I have that up on my phone.
Awesome. Well, Kara, thank you so much for joining us. And can I get a round of Zoom applause for Kara?
Thank you.
And then I'm going to bring up our next speaker. Next up for question 3, I have Joel Rivera. Let me bring you on Spotlight. Joel, take it away.
Hey, everybody. Thank you, Jonathan. It's great to be here in community with so many folks. I appreciated hearing from Auditor DeZoglio again. We saw each other recently at another one of these, so it's good to see you again. Kara, it's good to say hello to you virtually. Jonathan, I love your boo and vote sign in the background. It's my favorite part of October. Hey, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as I can. I'd like to go through some slides we've prepared explaining a bit more about our question and why we want you to vote yes on 3. Then I'll take some questions, and I will. I have the links already ready for you, Jonathan, because I've heard you ask the people before me, so I'm ready to go. So let me. Thank you very much. I will share my screen. Can folks see my screen? Yes. See. Beautiful. Okay. I'm sure some questions will come up for folks. I'll hopefully this slide presentation will answer many of them. If not, I know Jonathan is combing through the questions and will give me hopefully the ones that I can answer before my time is up. So I'm Joel Rivera. Apologies for not introducing myself sooner. I am the Deputy Campaign Manager on the Yes on 3 campaign. We want to vote yes on November 5th because we want to give Uber and Lyft drivers the option to form a union. I'll tell you a bit more about what that means, but Kara inspired me. I'm at the 32 BJ office right now. I have Yes on 3 shirts here, Yes on 3 lit as well. It's blurred out a little bit, but I'm here. We're doing the things. Very excited to be working on this campaign. So this is an ongoing organizing campaign. People have been doing this work for at least a couple years now. There was a legislative campaign for the past year and a half that ultimately failed through the state legislature. So we are, like many progressive issues, going to the ballot, like we did with fair share, driver's licenses, earned sick time before that, and so many other important issues that have brought so many good things to our community. So at the end of the day, rideshare drivers need a union. Yes on 3, the question addresses what we call TNC, or Transportation Network Company drivers, not delivery drivers. Within that TNC network, there's currently over 80,000 drivers who DPU has said can drive for Uber and Lyft. So it's a lot of workers who are there who don't yet have the power to join a union to be able to bargain collectively. These drivers are concerned, right? We've been working with them. We've been listening to them. They said they want a union because these are the issues they're facing. Unjust deactivations. The Uber and Lyft can deactivate these drivers at the drop of a hat. There's no process to that. There's no investigation. Uber and Lyft are like judge, jury, and executioner. We don't think that's fair. Many people who drive for Uber and Lyft do so at least part-time, if not full-time, more full-time than people think. And so we think it's very unfair for them to just take out their livelihood and not give them a chance to really follow up on it. Drivers have reported receiving less and less money from the rides. When they started out about 10 years ago, they used to receive 80% of their fares, and that Uber and Lyft have been slowly taking more and more of that. And there's no clarity on like how much they're supposed to get and why. Their pay is very unpredictable, which forces them to work longer hours for less money, which is not fair. And the drivers have also been exploited by these companies for many years. This shows us why we need a clear path forward. And we think that the best path forward right now is for them to be able to form a union so that they can work together to improve their working conditions. I want to share a couple, direct quotes from Uber and Lyft drivers who've been organizing with us. This is Yolanda Rodriguez. She drives for both companies, as most people who drive for Uber and Lyft do. Lyft deactivated my account, leaving me with a debt of $40,000. They don't care. We don't have a voice that represents us. We need a union that listens to us and represents us. I'll get into this a little more, but we know that like Uber and Lyft, they just give them the app. The drivers take on every other expense, right? Many of them will like lease, they will get new cars so that they can be able to drive for Uber and Lyft. They'll get bigger cars, nicer cars to try to command a higher fare. One deactivation and they're saddled with tens of thousands of dollars of debt that they can't repay, and Uber and Lyft are not like accountable for it. This is Brisel. He's great. He spoke at our launch last week. He talked about what was frustrating about it is I keep going around in circles with customer service. I was calling for about a year without ever getting a clear reason about why I got deactivated. It's not the same when they're hearing 1,000 people or 500 people. So my message to other drivers is, let's unionize. Super powerful at the State House, hundreds of drivers behind him. He's right. If it's one driver and we're all separate, it's not that powerful. But if there's 500 of us or 1,000 of us or 2,000 of us, we have strength in numbers. We have people power, and we need to use that. So people might be asking why we're doing this. Well, rideshare drivers, they don't currently have a mechanism to be able to form a union anywhere in the United States. The reason for that is because they're gig workers, and under the National Labor Relations Act, or the NLRA as people usually call it, they don't have a right to form a union. So what we're looking at, like many other progressive issues, is a state fix to a national problem. So we are trying to give them that right to form a union at the state level. These folks who work in the ride-hail or rideshare business, it's not like traditional transportation companies. They take on all the costs, risks, and liability associated with their vehicles. The companies still have control, almost complete control of what's going on, though. But the individual workers are the ones who are saddled with this issue whenever taking folks from one place to another. People might wonder how we do this. Well, Massachusetts has already paved the way for these folks, rideshare drivers, to form a union. They've created similar systems statewide many years ago for childcare workers and for home health aides. Our SEIU family there with 519 and 1199. And those are also professions where workers perform their jobs independently and have very differing or variable schedules. So we've done stuff like this before. So it's definitely possible. There's precedent for it, and we can make this happen. The AG settlement. Some of you may have heard about this. This often confuses people. I'm going to do my best to clarify this, and if there's any questions afterward, I'll do my best to answer them. But so the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, she sued Uber and Lyft. She said that it wasn't right the way that Uber and Lyft were treating their employees here. They settled in July, I believe. Uber and Lyft have to pay $175 million, and they have to bring up the floor of their working conditions. They need key baseline standards for drivers, like a higher base pay, as well as a health insurance stipend, paid family medical leave, which is like the things that we have fought for, right? The SEIU, Raise in Massachusetts, our community, faith, and labor partners, the elected officials who have worked with us, we fought for these baseline protections that the AG said now Uber and Lyft have to give people. But again, I'm talking about, this is bringing up the floor. We're talking about trying to raise the ceiling. We're trying to give them an opportunity to be able to form a union and to be able to bargain collectively as Uber and Lyft drivers, as rideshare network drivers. So we know this industry changes very rapidly. We want them to be able to protect themselves and their families. So we're going to the ballot. Not to bury the lead there, we're on the ballot on November 5th. We want folks to vote yes on 3. Since July, the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, has come out in favor. Since then, we have a lot more endorsements, over 100 of them, including 50 state legislators. We have Ayanna Pressley and Jim McGovern on board as well, a bunch of community organizations from community faith and labor backgrounds. So we are moving. This is really like we're building a movement here. It's really wonderful to be a part of. So a yes vote would give Massachusetts rideshare drivers who work for places like Uber and Lyft the option to join a union. They are still able to maintain their flexibility and independence as gig workers. The option is guaranteed for most workers, but not for rideshare drivers. So we think that they should be given the same right as most other workers. With a union, they can negotiate with the companies on better wages, benefits, working conditions. Individuals would be able to have representation, which would be really amazing. Jonathan, how am I doing on time?
You can take like a minute or two, like maybe like another minute, and then I want to bring up some of the questions.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So folks, I'm sure we'll have a question about process, and I'm going to put my email in the chat and we can follow up. But how it works is we'll give folks an option to form a union. They will then negotiate with Uber and Lyft collectively, and that agreement would be binding sort of industry-wide, right, in Massachusetts. So that's what we call sectoral bargaining in the industry. I'm still learning about some of this stuff. It lays out a process to make it easier for folks to be able to form a union. It creates an organizing process. So once we sign up 5% of drivers in the bargaining unit, they get a list of all the eligible workers. So one of the things that's hard about this is we don't know who is driving for Uber and Lyft. So getting that list means the drivers now know who to organize, which is really great. And then once we reach 25% of eligible voters, in the bargaining unit, it would become a certified bargaining representative of that union. And then they start bargaining. And again, it would be sort of industry-wide with the other companies. Sectoral bargaining would cover all the folks who drive for the rideshare apps based in Massachusetts. And then lastly, the Secretary of Labor would need to review it. Once that's approved, it would become binding upon the entire industry. So bottom line, the drivers are launching something that's really first of its kind. No one else has won anything like this anywhere in the country. We hopefully will win November 5th, and that would be bargaining and unionization rights for more than 70,000 people across Massachusetts, which would be really amazing for our labor movement and our progressive movement. I can take questions now.
Awesome. And let me read out some of them from the chat. I see a question of and I think you touched on some of this, but just to reiterate, why can't drivers currently create and join a union?
Yeah.
And why should voters be the ones deciding which professions and jobs have unions and which don't?
Yeah. So why, can you repeat that, Jonathan? I'll write him down.
Yeah, it was like, why can't drivers currently create or join a union right now?
Yeah. So they can't currently do that right now because they're not, because as independent contractors, they're not covered under the National Labor Relations Act, the NLRA, which is the law that gives a majority of workers the legal right to form a union. They're outside of that. And so we're trying to create a mechanism where these independent contractors in this narrow industry are able to form a union and be able to bargain collectively with those companies. So they currently don't have a mechanism. We're trying to create one. There's unlikely to be a national solution, so we're looking for a state solution.
Great. And then press reports that there will be legal challenges if this wins. What do you see as likely to happen in that regard?
I'm not sure that there will be. I mean, we have a strong legal team. I think they've written this in a way that is narrow and hopefully I guess like lawsuit proof. And I think if they do sue, I hope that we win. I think that we've done this work in a way that best sets up to win and to protect that win. I think that we have as good of lawyers as they do, if not better. So I'll take our chances on that.
It's not something directly related to the question, but I appreciate the question about why some of these types of companies even exist. because of the predatory practices from Uber and Lyft. So I appreciate that. The dislike of them. But the next question is kind of something noting about how that this leaves out kind of any thoughts on why it leaves out workers who are, let's say, like the app-based delivery drivers, and what would be like, how does this impact, not impact them?
Yeah.
And then also a question about kind of reclassifying drivers as employees.
Yeah. Those are two tough questions that we need a lot more time to talk about. I think the first one is less challenging. We have seen like our movement be vulnerable to legal challenges, like the relatability clause, they call it in Massachusetts. Fair share was thrown out in 2018 over that. I mean, the opposition, they don't have field game. They don't have power the way that we do. They throw money at ads. They throw money at like legal fees. So that's how they try to beat us. And so in 2018, they knocked fair share off the ballot. We had to wait 4 years to come back in 2022 and finally win. And I mean, they sued us in 22 too. We just won because we learned our lesson. And so we're trying to keep that lesson. We're trying to make this narrow and make this winnable and make this sort of like lawsuit proof in the future. Personally, I think it would be great to include those delivery drivers and stuff too. I think they operate kind of in a different market. I think those workers maybe are not yet organized or organizing with other folks. And so what I can say is we're focused on the rideshare folks. And this doesn't mean we're cutting them out or leaving them out. We can always go back for more later. I think right now, this is just the folks that we have that we've been organizing for years now. And this is what they've said that they want. And so that's what we are pursuing.
Great.
Second question you asked, Jonathan, was about what?
They were about kind of other app-based drivers, and the other part was about kind of reclassifying drivers as employees and kind of this classification issue.
The classification question is a good one. That's something that we need a lot more time to talk about. I guess the short answer is the settlement was partly about that, and the Attorney General did not answer that question and kind of punted the ball down the field. So we are not trying to solve that problem at the ballot, this issue of employee status. We are only trying to give them the right to form a union. Like, that's it. This is a worker fight. We want them to have that right to form a union like so many other folks and who are workers. So we are not tackling this issue. We're not furthering or worsening the debate of their employee status. I've gotten a couple times like, what happens if you win the right for them to form a union as like independent contractors and then Uber and Lyft make them employees? And I was like, you promise? Like, will they? Like, that's great. We want them to have the rights of employees, right? Employees have the right to form a union. And so that would only be beneficial, right? That would only help us. I don't think that they would do that, but if they did, I don't think all of our work goes out the window. We've spent years organizing drivers, bringing them into our movement, educating them on our talking points, listening to them and letting them kind of lead the work that we've done over the past few years. And so I don't think that work goes out the window if Uber and Lyft perform a miracle and treat them like real people. I think that would be very surprising.
Great. And then I'm going to bundle a few a few questions speak to the same thing. Do you have a sense, has there been any kind of polling done about what percentage of drivers support question 3?
Yeah. Like an overwhelming percentage of them support forming a union. I think some polls have it at like over 70%, some have it at over 80%. Drivers are overwhelmingly the ones that we've spoken to in support of being able to form a union. I think that should come as little surprise to folks. I mean, as I said, folks have gotten smaller and smaller chunks of the fares. They are making like less money working long hours. They face unjust deactivations. They take on all the expense, all the risk of buying cars, paying for gas and maintenance with up until August 15th, no benefits at all. So I mean, when you offer them an opportunity to, like, a place to gather, to form a union, to be able to decide collectively on what they want, and to be able to bargain for better wages, benefits, and working conditions, they like that. And we know as like movement folks that, like, the most important voice is the voice of impacted community. I tried to get a driver here today, but we couldn't find anybody whose schedule worked. But for almost all of these presentations that we're doing for folks, we're bringing a driver, and we're splitting the time. I'll do my presentation, and we'll have you hear from that person firsthand. But again, we have thousands of folks who've been organizing for years now, and what they're telling us is they want the right to form a union. And so that's what we are pursuing hand in hand with them. That's what we're hoping to accomplish on November 5th.
Awesome. Let me just do 2 more questions so that I can get poll questions that haven't yet been asked, and we'll wrap up to get on to other ones. Do work like, is there a specific union that would end up representing the workers if they decide to form a union? Is that like there are a few questions about that, as well as a few questions, if you could I think you touched on this a bit, about what the lawsuit, like what was the status of the lawsuit from the Attorney General, of where that stands relative to this?
Yeah, for sure. So I don't have a great answer on who they would unionize with. I think that the possibility of 32BJ and the machinists who have been organizing them for all these years would be high. There's also, I think it's kind of like a legal question of what the entity looks like. Is it like a completely separate union? I think that we would maintain a close relationship with these drivers, whether they choose to unionize with us or with the machinists. They have a lot of drivers as well, and we tried to coordinate the driver side campaign and the ballot campaign. The lawsuit, how it plays, I mean, I think it's great to sort of bring up the floor. Again, I think that the Attorney General herself has spoken out that even though that settlement happened, she's still in support of Yes on 3 and them being, the Uber and Lyft drivers being able to form a union. So I don't think it changes our fight. I think potentially it muddies the waters a little bit because it confuses people because they hear that they're like being treated a little better now. But I mean, if you think about it, that lawsuit wouldn't have happened if Uber and Lyft were treating their employees well, right? And who's to say they won't, like, their conditions won't stay the same, and 10 years later they'll still be making these like same wages with the same benefits when every other worker has come up and gotten like a much better working life. So I think that's what it's about. I mean, I think when I say they brought up the floor, I think that's great, and I don't mean to diminish the Attorney General's lawsuit at all. I think she did what she could within her power. What I'm saying is, we think, and she's in agreement, that they should be able to form a union so that they can raise the ceiling, right? So that they can go back and fight for more, for better wages, better benefits, better working conditions. Because this is going to be a fight, every year or two, right? Whenever they have to negotiate new contracts and stuff, rather than waiting another 10 years for another lawsuit that's going to take several years to happen. I mean, these people need money and better benefits now. They're providing for their families. And so we don't want to mess with their livelihood.
Okay, so final thing, because we do have get to the other questions. Joel, if people want to learn more about question 3, where do they go?
Great question. Thank you very much. Our website is voteyeson3mass.com. You can follow us also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at voteyeson3mass. And you can also reach out to me, Joel Rivera, Deputy Campaign Manager. My email is joel.rivera@sau32bj.org. Also, when I stop sharing my screen, I can drop all these links in the chat so you have them as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
I did want to say on our website, Jonathan, we have an endorsements tab. If you could see this, and there's over 100 people in here, including elected officials and community organizations and labor unions. And we would love to add Progressive Mass to this list of folks supporting our cause.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Well, can I get a round of Zoom applause for Joel? And then I'm gonna kind of round of Zoom applause, and then let me bring up Graham Moore, who's going to be talking about question 4.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me and my colleague, Jamie Morey, she, her, the opportunity to speak. I'm Graham Moore, he, him, the Educational Outreach Director of Yes on 4. This is actually my second ballot measure campaign. I wasn't staff, but I was a volunteer knocking on a lot of doors for the transgender rights campaign in 2018. We would love to have progressive mass endorsement of this measure, which me and Jamie know painfully well is really a matter of life and death for many people, and disability versus freedom for many people. So what this measure is this will provide regulated access to 5 therapeutic psychedelic substances in Massachusetts. In addition to that, it is going to remove limited criminal penalties for personal use of these substances, in line with the official recommendation of the American Medical Association to treat personal substance use as a public health issue rather than a criminal issue. The way this would work if this measure passed is that the governor, attorney general, and the treasurer, I believe, would appoint a commission and an advisory board which would draft rules and regulations around providing regulated access to one of the 5 substances over the course of the next 2 years. So in 2026, the first psychedelic therapy centers would open, and they would have 1 substance available within this regulated therapeutic framework. And over time, the program would have the option to add more of the substances. All the substances in this measure have demonstrated therapeutic value. And what I mean by that is they have extensive histories of therapeutic use, and the clinical and observational research on them is supportive of their therapeutic value. 2 of the substances, psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, if you've heard of those, is a prescription medication in Australia already for treatment-resistant depression. Another one of the substances, ibogaine, which is a psychedelic originating in Africa, is already a prescription medication in New Zealand, among a few other countries, where it is used off-label to treat opioid addiction. Ibogaine has unique therapeutic value in that it can eliminate withdrawal symptoms, which for anybody who's aware of the horror of an opioid addiction is often what keeps people enthralled to these drugs. They feel so awful when they try to get off of them that they feel so sick they have to keep using the thing that's killing them. People take ibogaine, and after even 1 dose, they can be free of that, giving them this critical window for recovery that nothing else can provide. That genuinely is pretty much it. We're happy to answer questions, and we can talk a little bit about our personal experiences. All these substances are non-addictive. They're already legally available if you're rich. You can go abroad and you can access this care therapeutically legally in a number of different countries, including Jamaica, the Netherlands, Mexico, Costa Rica. So if you're rich, you can read about this, you can fly off and you can get this treatment for your son or for yourself or for your spouse. But if you're in Massachusetts and you're struggling, you're stuck with the options we have now, or you're stuck going into the underground, which is very risky, where you can fall prey to unethical practitioners. Me and Jamie are both familiar with the highest levels of conventional psychiatric care. We've both had loved ones hospitalized at McLean in Belmont in Massachusetts, which is the #1, well, for a long time, it was the #1 ranked psychiatric hospital. Now it's #2, and MGH is #1. And people get great care there, and sometimes it works, but a lot of time it does not. I know somebody at McLean on 15 medications who's been there almost a year, getting the top of the line care, still not better. Still having to do a pros and cons list over whether or not to drink water. That's how sick she is. I used to be that sick, and then I used psilocybin when I was at the end of my rope, and I'm better now. Every single day I walk outside my house, I walk down the street. I used to have crippling OCD that made me a slave to my own mind, and now I'm free. And I know people still living in the hell that I used to live in, but they're too frightened because of the illegality of these substances to get better. And so, or to have the option. I can't guarantee this would help them, but the unjustified prohibition of these substances is keeping people without desperately needed alternatives. All around the world, never has access to these substances been observed to harm public health. Colorado passed practically the same measure as we're proposing in Massachusetts. Impaired driving-related fatalities in Colorado went down by 24%. If you round up, it was like 23 point something percent, 24% after the measure passed. Similarly, the percentage of hospitalizations, which is already tiny, it stayed practically the same. It's like 0.27% of hospitalizations in Colorado, to give you a sense of how small an issue this is. And it's still lower than it was in 2020. And the amount of arrests related to psychedelics also went down. So all of the opposition talking about what this might do, it's never happened anywhere. In the Netherlands, Jamaica, this stuff is safe. It's a human rights issue. You know, we're fighting for people's right to try something that could save their life when they're really, really sick. We're saying people shouldn't be arrested, shouldn't be threatened with arrest for trying to get better. And we're saying that people who have trouble with substances, they should be treated compassionately by their healthcare providers, and they should be empowered to tell their healthcare providers and be honest with them, not be threatened of criminal consequences, losing their job, losing custody of their kids. That's wrong. I'm going to pass the mic now to my colleague, Jamie Moore, to tell you a little bit about the dire need as the spouse of a combat veteran, as the mother of 4 kids, and then we're happy to open up to questions. So here you go, Jamie.
Hi, good night. I just, wanted to start by maybe backing it up a little bit and talking about the need for this. I think most people are aware that we are in a severe mental health care crisis in this country, especially since COVID. Rates of suicide are through the roof. There's unprecedented numbers of people suffering from depression, anxiety, other severe mental health issues. And I think we also all know someone who's been in therapy for a long time or taken medication for a long time and haven't found relief from that. Pharmaceuticals do help some people. Talk therapy does help some people, but for many, those options don't work. PTSD in particular is, a huge problem in the veteran and first responder population. And there really is no good treatment for PTSD, but these medications we've found are extremely, extremely effective in treating trauma, which basically is the underlying cause of, many mental health issues, substance use, and, treating that trauma in a really effective way can give people relief from, the many health issues that result from that. It's treatment-resistant depression. I have, a 21-year-old son who has struggled with severe depression and other mental health issues since he was 14 years old. He's been in constant therapy. He's taken all the pharmaceuticals that they recommended, and some of these medicines come with warnings. Actually, most of them come with a warning on the side of the box that says it may make you want to kill yourself. And that happened to me with one of my children when they first started taking the medicine. I got a call when they were on the school bus. I can't stop thinking about wanting to kill myself. And it had never been suicidal before. Another side effect of a medication my child was put on said it might make males lactate. The side effects from these medications are often worse than the symptoms that they're trying to treat. So, my husband is an Iraq combat veteran, and he suffers from severe PTSD. He's been under the care of the VA for the past 2 years, very dedicated to getting well. He's constantly there in therapy. He's taken all their medications. He's been through their 8-week PTSD program, and he has done nothing but deteriorate. He's lost his job, and things got really, really bad. They got him to agree to a 6-week hospitalization inpatient, which is what they think he needs. About a month ago, he agreed to that and was told that there was no bed for him until October 29th. And last week, he was taken by ambulance to the emergency room and hospitalized at the Brockton VA against his will for a week. His condition is very severe, and people like him need a new option. All the options have been exhausted. There are several nonprofits that take veterans and veteran spouses overseas to where, as Graham mentioned, where it's legal to receive this care, and the results are absolutely amazing. The clinical research shows these things are, very effective and safe. And we see it in all the stories of healing that people share with us as we do our work on this campaign on our website, which we linked. You can see the research for yourself. You can see the personal stories. A veteran reached out to me from the next town over and said that he was hospitalized for suicidality, and it was the VA doctor that pulled him aside and whispered in his ear, "Look into psilocybin mushrooms." And this guy had never even used cannabis. He was very straight-laced. But once he started looking at the research, it's just, you can't argue with it. And he did psychedelic assisted therapy, and it saved his life. He's now happy with a brand new baby. And we have so many stories like that. There's no reason for these very safe substances to remain illegal. The most dangerous substance of all is a national pastime in our country, alcohol. And it's outrageous to keep things that have been used for thousands of years in indigenous cultures as medicine out of the hands of people who need them, and continue to put people in cages for using them and trying to heal themselves. So I would love everyone to check out our website. Very informative.
Yeah, I'll drop in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, the evidence is there. The stories of personal healing are there, and we need everyone to please vote yes on for hope and healing, because it is much needed, and happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. I'm going to bring up a few of the questions in the chat. So what do you anticipate the opposition being to question 4, and what are the opposition arguments that you're hearing, and how do you respond?
So I wrote an open letter recently that has references, that makes the very strong evidence-based case for this measure, and I dropped that in the chat. I think it's important to say that we really have the evidence overwhelmingly on our side. Some people will nitpick and say that the clinical evidence is preliminary, and they're right for a lot of the substances, not for psilocybin, psilocin. But some of the clinical evidence is very preliminary, but that has to be contextualized with the fact that these are already used as therapeutics and have been used as therapeutics extensively and for a very long time. So you can't compare these substances apples to apples with new drugs going through the FDA system. 10,000 people, less than 10,000 people used Prozac before it was approved. Tens of millions of people have already used psilocybin. Millions of people have already used mescaline. They have long and extensive and well-documented histories of therapeutic use. So we know more from a public health perspective and from a real-world evidence perspective about these things than a newly invented drug. In terms of the opposition's arguments, they're worried about us no longer prosecuting people for the limited personal use of these things. It's very important to be clear, this is not rampant commercialization of these substances. This isn't expected to be a gold rush. Only a small percentage of adults use these things at all. Most of them use them very infrequently. And then on top of that, this measure does not allow retail sales. So you can't go into a store, purchase the psychedelic, and bring it home with you. You have to go through this regulated process, which involves, by law in this measure, a screening. So if you have a medical contraindication, you can't access it. And then you have to have a preparation session where they prepare you to have this substance administered, where you're prepped for the experience, set your intention. Then you have to have the experience under the supervision of a facilitator, a licensed facilitator. And then even after that, by law, you have to come in for a third appointment, an integration session, to help you make the best of that experience therapeutically. In terms of the limited personal use, people can cultivate within a limited space some of these things at home, but there's no selling, there's no buying. And there's a limit to how much you can have on your person. There's no public use. Public use is prohibited. And of course, use by people under 21 is prohibited. And if you have this stuff in your house, if you're growing it, it has to be secured from access by anyone under 21. So that's what the opposition is making a whole lot of hay about, that and the idea that people can't give informed consent to this, which again is absurd. People give informed consent all the time. They fly off to Costa Rica if they have the money, or if they're so fortunate they get a nonprofit to help them. You know, we know enough for people to give informed consent. And from a public health perspective, the opposition can't point to a single place where this has been an issue. In the Netherlands, you can walk into stores and purchase psilocybin truffles and take them home. You know, it's everybody's worst nightmare, you know, of the conservative view. And there's no issues. Like, it's less than 1% of the population in the Netherlands even uses psilocybin. These are truly non-addictive substances that the real world evidence backs up, have a very low potential for abuse. The observational evidence that exists indicates that personal use is more beneficial than harmful, period. And we think if somebody does have problems with these substances, it should be a public health issue. You know, they shouldn't be arrested. So.
And you've touched on this, I believe, a bit, but a question: does question 4 address oversight of the administrators or therapists who would be kind of administering the drugs and following up on the treatment of patients who do this therapy?
So this is all, a lot of this is all to be determined. So this commission and advisory board, which has to have a behavioral health specialist on it, is going to create these rules over an 18 to 24 month period. So the screening is required, but in terms of the details of the oversight, that's to be determined. It's intentionally written, the law is intentionally written so that there can be different levels of oversight depending on the patients and depending on the qualifications of the facilitator. So for example, if you are a psychiatrist, you may have different requirements in order to be a licensed facilitator than somebody who does not have a medical degree. Similarly, if you're working with a more vulnerable or a more vulnerable patient population, so for example, veterans with PTSD, perhaps you might require more training. In terms of how much training that could be, we can look to Oregon, where this program for one of the substances, for psilocybin, is already in effect. Facilitators there as a baseline require 160 hours of specialized training. So that could be, we could require more rigorous training here in Massachusetts. We have a lot of expertise to draw from at Harvard, from Dana-Farber, from MGH, but that's to be determined. Other questions? And I will just say personally, yeah, everybody should talk to their healthcare professional before doing anything, you know, any kind of health intervention.
And I think most of the other things, I think I'll do this and then kind of wrap it up with a question about if there are any drug companies trying to get patents for any of these, and what is the FDA's openness to approving them?
Well, the FDA seems very open, very excited. So psilocybin was actually twice granted a breakthrough therapy designation by the FDA. Initially, it was just for treatment-resistant depression, and then it received the designation for major depressive disorder. And what that breakthrough therapy designation says is that the preliminary clinical evidence indicates this could be far and above superior to existing treatments. So the FDA is very interested. FDA approval of psilocybin is anticipated within the next 3 years or so. But even once that happens, access initially is anticipated to be very, 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 very narrow, and far beyond the need and desire for these substances. And the others are also going through a similar process, but they're much farther away, maybe as much as a decade away.
Great. And then because we need to get to the next one, I want to, you've beat me to my ass of dropping links in the chat. So I'll note that you already have kind of dropped links in the chat, but if you want to just vocally tell people where they should go if they want to learn more. Yeah, go to maformentalhealth.org and follow us on social media. We're Yes4MA, I think. So here we go. Yes4MA at Yes4MA.
I dropped the link to our social toolbox in the chat as well, which will give you the links on all of our social.
And also our emails. Like, you can reach out to me directly, you can reach out to Jamie. Jamie is our community engagement director. She's trying to plan some fun events. She's happy to get you involved however you want to. We could really use your endorsement. Thank you so much for your time. Happy to be here. Have a wonderful night, everyone.
Awesome. Graham and Jamie, thank you so much for joining us tonight. If I can get a round of Zoom applause. for Graham and Jamie, and then we'll go on to the next question.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you both. And then I'm gonna bring up Estefania Tefa Galvez from question 5. Tefa, thank you so much for being here, and take it away.
Sorry, John.
Thank you. But you forgot my beautiful and amazing
Oh,
friend
James, let me add James.
in the fight. James.
James,
Everybody
adding
welcome
James.
James. The crowd
you.
goes crazy. Woo!
Thank you. Tefa and James, take it away.
Thank you to the 116 people that are still here with us. I know it's tough, but it's a good thing that we're all here, because there's 5 good questions. 5 good things could happen in Massachusetts, and we're gonna make it happen. And we are that 5th one. So we're gonna try to keep it short, but also feel free to ask as many questions as you need to. My name is Estefania Galvez. I was born in Colombia. I've been in Massachusetts for a year, but I've been a service worker before. And I have been working with James and the One for Wage team to get here. And I also want to recognize that Jonathan and Progressive Mass have been incredibly supportive for a long time. So we're very excited to have gotten to this final step with all of you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we got here, and then James is going to tell you a little bit more about the particulars of the question. And so I'm going to pass it over to James so that they can introduce themselves, and then we'll get started and go really quick.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for still being here. This is practice for when you receive your ballot, because we are going to be on the very last page and likely on the back. So like, this is good practice. You got to stick with it to like make sure people get paid a fair wage. So hi, everyone. James Wu, him, his pronouns. I am the campaign manager for Yes on 5, although some of you might also know me when I wear my other Feel First hats. But tonight I'm here with my Yes on 5 hat and really appreciating everyone for sticking around. So back to you, Tefa.
Yeah, so very briefly, as we all probably are familiar with, to be able to get a ballot question to this level, there has been multiple thousands and hundreds of thousands of signatures collected by community members, by workers across the state of Massachusetts. And here we are. Through that process, we also attempted to have a legislative fight. However, that did not work out, as we all know. So we decided that the best way to do this was to put it in the decision-making of the people of Massachusetts. This question is very relevant, not only for Massachusetts, but to the region. And also we are one of the top issues that people are worried about and want change on in the country right now, which is economic justice and fairness. And so we worked and did outreach, intense buildup of strength and narrative with workers throughout the last year. And that has brought us to being Yes on 5, the question that allows for minimum wages and tips on top. And James is now going to tell you a little bit more about the particulars of our legislation.
Great, thank you, Tefa. So our ballot initiative will do 2 parts. The first is it will raise the tipped minimum wage, which right now in Massachusetts is only $6.75 an hour, less than half of the $15 an hour that I know a lot of us had fought for years ago in Massachusetts. So it would raise the tip minimum wage to match the full minimum wage across the state slowly over the course of 5 years. So it will increase by, I think it will be like a 20% raise every year until we reach $15 an hour. And tips will continue to exist. Tips will still be on top of a worker's minimum wage. It's just that they will also see a really nice raise in their base wages. The second part of the ballot initiative would also allow restaurants and bars, after the 5 years are over and after all tip workers are making the full minimum wage, to also give restaurants and bars the option to include back of house workers in tip pools that already exist. This would include people like cooks, dishwashers, who also play an important role in making sure the customer has a really good dining experience. But, you know, right now, Massachusetts is one of the only 2 states that excludes back of house workers from tip pools, even after minimum wage, tip minimum wage workers are making the full minimum wage. So, so that's kind of what the ballot question would do. I do want to take a moment to just address some things that we've heard a lot from people that we talk to when we're on the streets, that we've heard when we were gathering signatures for this. And the first one is the opposition is going to claim that tips will go away after this ballot question passes. And that is honestly just a straight up lie. It's not even a nice little white lie like Santa Claus, but it's just a lie. There are 7 other states that have one fair wage, that pay their servers and bartenders a full minimum wage with tips on top. And in those states, restaurants continue to thrive. Tipping still exists. In fact, I visited 2 of those states last year. There are restaurants. Nothing has, like, the sky has not fallen. So I do just want to lift that up as something that you will likely hear if you turn on the TV or if you like go on YouTube or anywhere. So that is going to be the most common misconception and lie that the opposition will bring up. The other pieces are, like I mentioned, tips are not going to go away. They will continue to exist because we as a culture have thought of tips as a reward for really good service. But instead, right now, consumers are actually subsidizing these low wages that are paid by large corporations that just don't want to pay their workers the full minimum wage. Restaurants will continue to thrive. Menu prices are not going to go up exponentially. Again, we can see this happening in all of the other states that already have one fair wage. Restaurant prices are still like the same as Massachusetts. Tips are the same, if not higher, in these one fair wage states. And workers are getting paid more. So all in all, vote yes on 5. I don't know if Tefa, there's like more you want to add.
Just want to say that as you were saying this, I just remembered that in Colombia we pay minimum wages plus tips on top. So if Colombia can do it, I think Massachusetts can do it. It's just came to mind. No, I think that it's late. People have been sitting in their computers for a long time. So let's get to the questions and let's get to have people move along. So Jonathan, let's get some questions.
Let's see. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. Let me see. If I'm not seeing any questions yet, I will give you a quick questions. What states have already done this?
Oh, I have this memorized now. So California, Alaska, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, Minnesota.
Is it Montana that you're missing?
Montana is the one I'm missing, and Michigan recently became the 8th state to have one fair wage. On top of that, there are several municipalities that have one fair wage, including Chicago and Washington, D.C.
Oh, great. And so I see a question in the chat about how does it work that wages go up and how do restaurants pay that without raising prices?
That is a great question. And prices might go up. They will go up, but like it's going to be super minimal. There are a lot more things facing a restaurant than just labor costs, things like inflation, which is impacting all of us. Like when you go get groceries, eggs are like $5 more expensive now. So that kind of rising food costs and rising costs in just general existence, those things are also going to be impacting a restaurant. And we've seen from these other states that restaurants are able to pay higher minimum wages without having to, like, for example, triple the price of a plate of pasta or something like that. I will also note that, oh, sorry. No, So one more thing, and then I'll let Tefa go. This takes place over 5 years. This is a very slow increase, and restaurants will have plenty of time to kind of get used to paying those higher wages for their workers. Again, it's not all happening at the same time. It's happening over 5 years, which is a really long time, and restaurants will have that time to slowly get used to it and slowly figure out how to make things work.
Yeah, and I mean, as it stands right now, as customers, we're subsidizing the wages. So we are gonna pay less actually for the labor. But the real point here too also is that this is a situation that one of the biggest costs that happens in a restaurant is turnover. People don't stay at the job. And when people get paid well, people stay at their job, and people stay at their job long. So there's going to be a cost efficiency that is going to come from this more than a deficiency. And so I just wanted to share that with everyone.
I'm going to make one quick comment and go to other chats. I would also think that real estate is a big fixed cost in what a restaurant, like any restaurant, has to evaluate their prices much more so than the labor cost.
Yeah, and I would say that like the workers already are showing up, opening the restaurant, running the food, running everything, right? Like, why is it also the responsibility of the workers to carry their wages or hours?
So a question in the chat of who decides how tips are shared or not shared with other workers in the restaurant?
So that happens after the 5-year implementation. It's something that happens all over the country. It's decided location by location, and it's optional opt-in. It should be like according to the law, the workers decide how the tips get shared, and they decide whether to share them or not. Anything you want to add, James?
Nope. Tefa answered it really well.
I see a question. I see 2 questions, I guess, kind of asking about impact of this on restaurants of different sizes.
Yeah, so it will impact all restaurants of all sizes. There is no like small restaurant carve out or longer time period with this ballot initiative. I will note, you know, if this was passed as legislation, for example, there could have been a case where one of the compromises was like a small restaurant carve out or a longer time period. Again, this is not legislation, so we don't have that kind of ability to do things like that in the way that we might have had when we were trying to pass, in the way we might have had when this was a piece of legislation before it got on the ballot.
I see somebody also kind of bringing up a difference between kind of high-end restaurants and kind of less fancy restaurants when it comes to the way that kind of servers talk about tips, if you want to speak to that as well.
Yeah, there are like 3 different tiers of restaurants is what we see it as, you know, like your mom and pops, your intermediate restaurant, and then your high end. I think that this is a long term versus the short term. I think that in the long term, if you think about it, talking about real estate, talking about gentrification, it is in the interest of an Applebee's to take down the mom and pops. And so who are the people that are funding the Massachusetts Restaurant Association, the National Restaurant Association, and who's funding the National Restaurant Association? Applebee's and Chipotle and the multinationals. Who is funding development? Billionaires. So in the maintaining our communities thriving as ours, this is an investment towards that. And so it does have an impact on middle and low rate work restaurants, an impact that means that they're going to be able to create work environments that are going to be good for their workers, for themselves, for their communities, where workers are going to be able to spend where they work. And we all know that when people make more money, they spend more money. And so it's also going to be continuing to motivate the economy.
I want to shout out, there's a good comment in the chat that looks at kind of the history of the racist roots of kind of having certain jobs subjected to sub-minimum wages. So I just want to draw that attention to that in the chat, going back to the kind of the Pullman Railroad workers, and how often that there's a disproportionate impact in which jobs rely on tipped wage and sub-minimum wages. See a question about what jobs are currently subjected to the tipped wage.
Great question. So it is primarily going to be servers and bartenders in restaurants and bars. However, the tipped minimum wage also affects, I believe, people who work in salons, and I think like another small group of people that I am not thinking of right now.
Salons and people, there are some service workers in their airports, like shuttle people and stuff like that, that also have tipped wages. So basically what it does that is really awesome and important and super important for many reasons, including that people like me are the people that usually have those jobs. And particularly, I would probably be in that job if I had had a child 5 years ago, just being that real. Not to say that 5 years ago, I didn't have that job. I did. But people like me are seen as less than human in this world. And when we say no more sub-minimum wages, we're saying we're all worth it, dignity and labor in our workplace. And so what it does is it eliminates the classification of sub-minimum wage in the state level, and then we are all considered minimum wage workers.
Great. Let me see. For a few other questions, I see a question about what the impact on tipping ends up being. I think you spoke to this somewhat, but what has been the impact on tipping with the move to kind of one fair wage?
Yeah, so we know from data, and I'm happy to find a link to it and put it in a chat, but we know from other states that have done this that tipping continues to be the same, like same rates as other non-one fair wage states, if not higher tipping rates than non-one fair wage states. And I think a lot of that comes down to a couple different things, but one is we as a kind of culture have already been made to believe that tipping is a reward for really good service. It's a gratuity on top. But honestly, that's not the truth, but it's in the restaurant industries to make you think that. So if we were to have one fair wage in Massachusetts, then your tips would actually genuinely be a reward for good service, which is what it should be instead of a subsidy for low wages. I think the other reason that I want to lift up is when workers are getting paid more and they can rely on a certain amount in their paycheck every week or every other week, then they're going to be happier at work. And that means service will be better. When service is better, consumers like us are going to be tipping more, and that will lead to higher tipping rates. I will also note, as Tefa will probably mention at some point, is that servers and bartenders are actually like the best tippers ever.
I mean, we know some cases of some tippers that are bartenders that like they get so excited that they get a good service that they leave all of their tips from their shift to like someone just like out of excitement, because we know what the work is. And yeah, I think that the impact, I actually have worked in a restaurant where I made $15 an hour, and my tips were actually better than in the other place that I worked at. And I was new in the industry. This is also, I think that's something that is very important about this question is to set people up to succeed that have been set up to not succeed, not to bother those who have already succeeded in the industry, right? So like when you're new in the industry, you need to be able to like move through it. And so as someone that worked as a new person doing bar back and during the day bartending, it was actually incredible. It was an incredible opportunity. The way that I was treated in my workplace was with respect and support. As a matter of fact, until today, I am friends with my manager and my owner, the owners of the place. And the difference was that they really did care about me and everyone that was there. And in the other restaurant that I worked at, actually how I left was because there was wage theft. And so I think that another thing that is really important about this is wage theft is the #1 crime in the US. And this is the industry that it is the most prevalent in. And the reason why it is prevalent is because of the use of sub-minimum wages. So this is like a direct vaccine is what I call it. Maybe I'm calling it the wrong thing. Are we going to get rid of all wage differentias? No, but we will be giving people a real opportunity to have accountability in being paid their full wages.
I'll do one question that I see from the chat, and then kind of wrap up. But somebody asking, like, what leg does the opposition stand on other than veiled self-interest? Like, to what extent, like, is there any actual opposition beyond like the self-interest of let's say the restaurant industry?
Honestly, no. And a lot of the opposition that we hear is either directly from the restaurant association, or it is from their workers who they have fed so much misinformation to, that we hear from workers that are scared that their tips will go away. And like, that is, again, a lie that's being spread by the restaurant association. That is a lie that's being spread by their bosses who don't want to pay them the full minimum wage plus tips on top. I would also add that for many of you who might have worked on the Fight for 15, like 6-7 years ago, if my math is right, a lot of the arguments that you heard when we were trying to fight for a higher minimum wage period are the same arguments you'll hear this time around. Things like the sky is going to fall down, restaurants are going to close, small businesses will close. And all of this is just, it's been like 6 years since we passed $15 an hour. The sky has not fallen. Things are still going fine in Massachusetts, and we are also able to visit our favorite stores, and we're also able to go to restaurants and stuff like that. So a lot of the arguments you'll hear then are the same things you'll hear now. And I urge you to not fall for that misinformation. And, you know, if someone comes to you saying this, like, please let them know the truth.
Yeah, and I think that the leg that they stand on is hate and misinformation, and the leg that we stand on is love and community and building. And that's why we, with your help and every community member, are going to do it. As someone that has been a worker in a union and not in a union, believe me, being able to say what you actually want when you don't have protections and when your food and your rent depend on it, it's hard. And so I would recommend that if you encounter someone, like, the best way to respond to a server that feels this way is asking them how they found out about it, asking them who told them that it was bad for them. And a lot of the times they're going to tell you, like, my boss or myself, because I'm so scared of change. And so one of the things that we really are combating here is the fear mongering that has happened in our communities, telling people like us that we don't deserve better and that our labor is not worth its full potential.
Awesome. And then you've already dropped it in the chat, but kind of James and Teffa, if people want to learn more about question 5, where do they go?
Visit yeson5ma.com. We are also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at yeson5ma. 5 is the number, not spelled out. And folks can always feel free to reach out to Teffa or myself at any time. I dropped our emails in the chat. Please excuse my typo in Teffa's name.
No worries. Can I get a round of Zoom applause for James Wu and Teffa Galvez? Thank you both so much. I promise, in addition to these are the 5 questions that will exist on your ballot statewide. There are some district-specific ballot questions since it's late. Kimberly, I will give you kind of a couple quick minutes to tell people about some of the legislative, like, district-specific questions that people might see.
These are the districts we're in. This is MassCare, the single payer campaign for Massachusetts. We, with Medicare for All, would have saved the hospitals that are now being closed. We would have saved all those jobs and the hospital crisis that we are in, and that is only going to get worse. Our legislation has been languishing on Beacon Hill for 25 years. And the truth is that marketplace profit-driven medicine is a lie. It is going to implode everybody. What is happening right now in Dorchester, Mattapan, Quincy, and 17 communities in central Massachusetts is going to happen everywhere in Massachusetts unless we get rid of the current model that we have for healthcare. And the only way to do that is to adopt a single payer system. We're already planning on refiling. We're working up our co-sponsors. And one of the ways that we have ammunition when we go up to Beacon Hill is when we do non-binding ballot questions in representative districts. There are 11 this time. We have 2 in leadership. We have 2 open seats. We have 2 Republican districts, and the rest are a little bit here and there. We've never lost. We've been doing these questions for quite some time. We've never lost a district. I am very happy to have people come. It's a very simple ballot question. It says, shall the representative from this district be instructed to vote for legislation, create a single payer healthcare system that would provide Massachusetts residents with comprehensive care, including freedom to choose doctors, other healthcare professionals, facilities, services, and eliminate the rule of insurance companies in healthcare by creating a publicly administered insurance trust. It would be a yes vote if you are in one of those states. Here is the wording. My name is Kimberly Connors. I am the executive director. I appreciate the 73 people that are still on at 9:03 to hear my pitch. Here's my check. Here is who I am, and our form on Action Network to sign up. How's that, Jonathan?
Awesome.
Under 5 minutes.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I think I'm going to just put a question in the chat. It wasn't in the red book because it's only for certain legislative districts. The first 5 are all statewide. And Kimberly, I assume this is question 6 when in the districts it appears on the ballot.
It's in question 6, except for one town, and that's Sheffield in Western Massachusetts, where it's question 7.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, and thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
And thank you for the troopers who are still on. Just to do a round of Zoom applause for Kimberly. And thank you for joining. Final closeout comments before I free people to your evening. And again, thank you for troopers. So as noted, this event is being recorded. It will be available on our website, progressivemass.com, on our social media channels, and in your inbox, because we will send it out to you as a follow-up to this discussion. As my kind of coworker Melanie just noted in the chat, if you enjoyed this evening and found it valuable, we would love if you joined us as a member of Progressive Massachusetts. Our ability to do this work depends on our grassroots supporters like you. So if you go to progressivemass.com/membership or progressivemass.com/donate, or just go to our website and click one of those buttons, we would appreciate kind of any and all contributions. You can become a member for as little as $5 or as much money as you would like to donate, because we appreciate kind of having a strong base of supporters from across the state. My other kind of quick comment is we heard a lot of excellent presentations this evening, and for things to pass on the ballot, they need people to help them pass on the ballot. So if you are interested in getting involved in any or all of the campaigns, dropping in kind of just a survey of people here, that'll go in email follow-up as well, so you can let us know what you are interested in doing of the different things that you've gotten to hear from this evening. And my final comment will just be to give yourself a round of applause. If you're still here, you've been at this event for a long time. So I want you to make sure to give yourself a round of applause. for the time that you spent with us. I thought we had a number of excellent speakers tonight talking about all of these issues. I appreciated the engaged questions that we had in the chat across the evening. And as noted, we will make this available as a recording, so you can watch it again, you can share it with friends, and please do share it with friends, because we want when people go to vote in November, or even as early in October with a mail ballot, that they go informed and engaged. So finally, thank you so much, and I'll close out the recording now.